Welcome to Cooking from the Cave, and today I'm going to be demonstrating a vegan recipe that involves kale, mushrooms, some carrots and onions that we're going to stuff inside these mini sweet peppers and then slow bake them in the oven at 350 in a marinara sauce. There's a lot of cooking time involved, not so much prep time, so let's just get started with this. We're going to start by heating up a large saute pan. I'm going to add extra virgin olive oil, probably about 2 tablespoons worth, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. Then I'm going to add 1 diced red onion, and it's important to add it at add everything at a certain time in the recipe. So you want to get the onions starting to cook. You want them to start to sweat a little bit, and the steam is a good sign. The sound of it is a good sign. Just keep an eye on it. We don't want these to caramelize too much, but we do want them to develop a little bit of color. I'm going to sit and stir these now for probably about 30 seconds, and then I'll start adding more ingredients. The next ingredient we'll add are the carrots. And when making your stuffing for the peppers, the carrots are going to probably take the longest to cook because you need them to break down a little bit. You don't want them to be so al dente and crunchy. So we'll get those cooking second. Again, the pan's still on medium-high to high heat. I want to develop nice color on everything. The carrots are going to get nice and bright and orange. Once that occurs, now we can add, and that'll be about 30 to maybe a minute cooking time. Once the carrots brighten up, we can add our mushrooms. This is portobello mushroom caps that we've cut into smaller pieces. There's about 10 here. So 1 red onion, 2 carrots diced up, and then 10 portobello mushrooms diced up. And these guys you can just drop right in the pan. The mushrooms aren't going to really caramelize, but they will release a lot of liquid. So once you see some steam coming off your pan or out of your pan, at that point I want you to turn your heat down to low and just continually stir these guys, probably for the next 15 or 20 minutes. Again, there's a lot of liquid that's going to come off these. You'll see the steam. That's your key. Go ahead and turn that heat down. Now in my other pan, I need to get my sauce going, my marinara sauce that we're going to cook, eventually cook those peppers into. So again, I'll turn this on high heat. Add roughly about another 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil in this pan. Again, just enough to coat it. Once that gets up to heat, and you can usually tell by the oil easily moving around the bottom of the pan, we'll go ahead and add this is a half of a yellow onion. Stir that around. This you can allow to get a little bit more color on it because I don't add sugar to my marinara sauce. I allow the natural sweetness of those onions to sweeten up that tomato-based sauce there. So let the yellow onions develop some color. This will probably take about 2 minutes as opposed to the 1 minute over there for the stuffing or the filling of those peppers. And you'll just stir this continuously for about 2 minutes, making sure they evenly brown up on you. After 2 minutes of letting the onions caramelize, we're going to go ahead and add our 5 cloves of garlic. And I'm going to add a pinch of salt to the onion and garlic mixture. This just helps bring out the natural sugars in the onions, and that'll help sweeten up that marinara sauce. Only let this cook now after you add your garlic. Again, remember this is going to be on medium-high to high heat. Only let this cook for about 20 seconds. You don't want that garlic to burn because that garlic's going to make that sauce very bitter. We can now deglaze our pan with a ½ cup of red wine. And all I want to do is just pull up any sort of coloration, any sort of caramelization, any sort of browning that's on the bottom of that pan, and stir this wine into our onions. The onions are going to kind of act as little sponges. Pull that great flavor of that wine in, And once we get all that browning off the bottom of the pan, all that caramelization, the onions absorb, and a lot of that wine gets cooked off, we can go ahead and add our tomatoes. And what I have here is a 28-ounce can of tomato puree I'm going to add, as well as a 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes or crushed tomatoes. I can now add my dried herbs. I have 1 bay leaf. I have my dried Italian herbs and a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. And this, once it comes up to a boil, we're going to want to bring it down to a simmer, and we'll let this simmer roughly about 25 to 30 minutes. You could even make this aspect of this the day before. This is a great sauce to use for a whole bunch of different things, from meatballs to pasta. So this could be done ahead of time. Just stir this, and once it starts to boil, bring it down to a simmer, and we can just let that be. Now, our mushrooms over here have really cooked down quite a bit, which is a good sign, but there's still a lot more to go. So I'll just continue to keep an eye on this for the next 10 to 15 minutes, see where that gets us. And your mushrooms will just continually cook out a lot of that moisture, and your stuffing will start to get smaller and smaller in that pan because of all that water being cooked off. With the mushrooms cooking now for 15 minutes, there's still a little bit more time to go in the cooking process. We can go ahead and start adding our dried ingredients. This is a teaspoon of dried thyme. I want to add 3 pinches of salt, probably about a half a teaspoon of salt, and then I want to add about the same in cracked pepper. Now, the reason why we're going to add the dried ingredients now is because we want to give them time to blossom so that thyme flavor really comes out. And at this point, just continue to stir it and also let it cook until you don't see any more water in the bottom of the pan. I'm guessing we're probably about another 5 to 10 minutes away. All the water in the mushrooms has now been cooked out, so we can add our kale. And the kale I've finally chopped up. What you want to do though is remove this center rib. So what I'll do is I'll grab hold of the leaves on either side, and I'm going to pull that rib towards me. So then this woody guy here is all removed, and you can just discard him. And then I'll chop up the rest of the leaves. These have already been chopped up, so we can add this right to our mushroom, onion, and carrot mixture. The kale will give off a little bit of water, not a lot, but you want to make sure you cook that off as well. So let me just stir that in, and as you stir it in, you'll notice it'll brighten up in color a little bit. Now is a good time to add just a pinch more salt, because again, that salt helps pull out that moisture. And I'm just going to stir all this in, wait for it to wilt down, make sure the pan is nice and dry when I'm all said and done, and then I'll shut it off and we'll let this mixture cool and we can stuff our peppers then. The kale is nice and green, it's nice and wilted down. At this point we can turn off the heat. We're going to let this cool down to room temperature so then we can work with it, and then I'll show you the next steps. All right, we can stuff these now, and I've stuffed all of them except for a few to show you how I do it. And I'll just use a regular soup spoon, and I'll put as much of it on top and as much as I can get in there, and I'll just rotate that spoon around and push that filling down to the bottom. Now, this filling made 4 dozen mini peppers. You can obviously use the large bell peppers if you would like. I wouldn't go too spicy unless you really know your guests and they like the spicy peppers, but bell peppers would work great for this. Even poblano peppers would be okay for this. Or you could just make a small batch of these and then freeze the rest, or use the rest of the stuffing for maybe omelets in the morning or for quesadillas later on in the day. Stuffing's very versatile, so make a batch, save a little bit, do the stuffed peppers, and you'll really enjoy it. A lot of flavor here. So again, use the soup spoon, fill it up, and then use the other side of it to push it down in there, and you are all set. Now, you can do this. We can now add the sauce right to the top of this, or you could take the peppers and put it into your saucepan, depending on how big your saucepan is, how much room you have and stuff. In this case, because I have so many peppers and they're already laid out for me, I'm going to go ahead and pour that sauce right on top. And then we're going to bake this in the oven for about an hour at 350. And I don't know exactly how much sauce I'm going to use. I used almost all of it, but what I want to be able to do is see a little bit of the peppers peeking through. So again, depending on the size of pan, if we put the peppers back into the sauce, however you want to do it, just make sure you can see the peppers. We want to bake this uncovered because of the amount of liquid that will still come out of the peppers as they're cooking. And then that water, if the pan is uncovered, that water is going to get evaporated in your oven through the cooking process. So at this point, we can go ahead and put this in the oven, 350. We'll come back in an hour and we'll be ready to plate this up and eat it. After an hour of cooking in the oven at 350 degrees on a standard bake mode, our peppers are done. Now, there's going to be a lot of sauce, there's going to be some nice caramelization on it and everything. The easiest thing to do is just plate this up and serve it. If you want to make it non-vegan but still vegetarian, obviously you could have put cheese on this. You could even put cheese in the stuffing. But this works out to be a very delicious, very flavorful, and extremely healthy vegan, and also either as a main dish or as an appetizer or a side dish for your guests. And all you want to do is just grab a spoon, ladle up a couple of the peppers as well as some of the sauce on here. There's enough color going on here that it just looks beautiful by itself. And there you go, our stuffed peppers, vegan style, made and cooking from the cave. I'm Chef Pete Truzek, and I will see you real soon.